It's worth reminding ourselves sometimes of this simple fact. While money spins the wheels, emotions are the engine of football. Without that buy-in, that care, the game this weekend, next weekend, the pubs, the TV companies, sports centres, entire industries, this video even, would not exist. The entire ecosystem falls down and the economic model of the game doesn't work. It's that simple. And I love that because it's powerful. The centrifugal force tying all of this together is the fans, and the fans should, and much as we don't feel like it sometimes, do actually have the final say. That should never change. But at times, for me, the passion of the game can get in the way of thinking clearly about what we're watching. It can cement us in camps and adhere us to certain ways of thinking, grounding us or igniting the fire in us, and that can sometimes make it hard to know what we, including myself, are looking at. The milieu of the modern fan ramps up that rage, joy, sadness, or passion tenfold. Growing online discourse takes place primarily on platforms that are literally coded to reward the most outlandish and emotionally driven views with the supreme currency of the sites, engagement, increasingly translating into real money. We then jump to algorithm-fueled conclusions, forming more and more adversarial camps in increasingly polarized positions, all the while lining the pockets of the executives in Silicon Valley. The game needs emotion, but there's a fine balance to be struck. And in my view, there's victims who are hit particularly badly by our current media landscape, as the fans' turnaround time on forming opinions is shorter than ever. Enter Kai Havertz. Our new £65 million player has divided opinion, produced some hot and cold performances, and is certainly not a plug-and-play type acquisition, no matter what I'm about to say. There's some who love him, and there's some who want him out of the team already. They can't believe we've signed a Chelsea reject to replace Sir Granit Xhaka, a universally loved character whose worth was always apparent in his 7 years at the club. But there is always a silent majority who are truly ambivalent, yet to decide, and this video is for you. The landscape we exist in encourages us to jump to conclusions way too soon, and we can air them far too easily. If Kai Havertz dropped a stinker in the pre-season of 1990, you'd have to write a letter to Arsenal's fan club to get your opinions aired to the 1,000 or so who might hear it at the next meeting or read it in the next round robin, and by the time you got the pen and paper out and searched for the stamp, you're probably over it and getting on with your day. Now, fueled by the emotion of the game, you can repost the Havertz fail comp that's been watched by 1 million people in 1 hour, text your mate that he's rubbish, and read some out of context stats within the space of 30 seconds, all while on the toilet doing your post-match. As a recording, he's played 2 competitive games for Arsenal, and there's people saying they want him sold. The washing machine is spinning a lot quicker these days. And for me, Havertz is a prime example of someone who has it harder. And that is because of this. How do we know when Kai Havertz has had a good game? He's not going to score 40 a season. He's not going to beat 3 men with a couple of stepovers and rifle at top bins. He isn't going to make a game-winning tackle either. That's not his job. He's not a moments player. Kai Havertz's name probably won't be making headlines unless he makes a goal contribution. It's not immediately obvious what he does without watching him specifically and only focusing on him. Most fans only watch a game once. So if you don't stand out, then why would you become a fan favourite? Without being a moments guy, like a Saka offensively or a Rice defensively, many fans don't see his worth, obviously, on the first watch of a game. So he's a prime suspect for a quick dismissal and a narrative to quickly form, especially in the wake of a bad result. And in some ways, that's kind of fair. Not everyone dedicates their time to trying to understand football on a deep level. Some people just want to have a fun weekend. But if you're watching this and you got this far, I sense you think it's deeper than that for you. So, how do we assess him? Let's have a look. Havertz does a huge volume of what I will call intermediate value work. He's quiet, diligent, but a lot of his work can fly under the radar. In my view, he'll be the mercury in our performance thermometer this season. When the temperature's high and we're spanking teams 3 and 4-0, Havertz will be soaring whether you notice it or not. When we're cold and struggling, he'll be the first to get kicked by the media. When you're assessing a player, naturally, you think about their on-ball work, especially if they play further up the field. On the ball, it's easier to make a verdict. You can tell if they misplaced a pass or a shot. There's more freedom in the final third for a player to make instinctive, non-coached decisions, meaning you can assess their individual decision-making better. And out of possession, you're likely to be in a more rigid structure, so it's harder to see what's them and what's not. But a lot of Havertz's best qualities come off the ball. So when assessing him, in my view, it's paramount that off-the-ball work, in and out of possession, is measured. Now, there will be some of you watching who say, we didn't spend £65 million for off-the-ball work. But having read some great conversations about this from other people that I respect in the football space, I want to share a perspective with you that I hope will challenge that idea. Havertz had 69 touches in 106 minutes against Nottingham Forest last weekend. Let's say each touch is worth 3 seconds of play, probably a liberal estimation. That would mean Havertz was on the ball for 207 seconds, or 3 minutes and 27 seconds, across the match. That's 102.5 minutes of the game not touching the ball. So maybe we didn't sign him for off-ball qualities, but do we just completely discount 102 minutes of a game? Clearly, on-ball work is the high leverage stuff, but there's definitely a good argument to be made that would suggest putting off-ball work as number one in terms of importance in our assessment of a player's contribution. I probably wouldn't go that far, but you certainly can't argue it's not important at all. It's what you spend most of your time in a game doing. You can't just ignore it or laugh it off. And off the ball, Havertz is terrific. Havertz is really, really good at finding pockets of space. Look how many times he finds himself between the lines, ready to take and turn against Nottingham Forest just in the opening half an hour. The black line is the pass that's played, the red dotted line is the one that's on for Havertz. I'm not saying every single pass needs to go into him, sometimes safety is best, but with a bit more trust from his back line, one or two of these situations could have been quick, easy ways to hit Forest at their heart because of his top-class positioning. When this happens 9 times in half an hour, surely there's something there to develop. Watch when and how he receives too. Havertz always knows his next pass, as he's so aware of his surroundings, and his weight of pass is just sublime. Havertz is also terrific in our press, because in my view, he has a natural understanding of where to stand to block lanes. Again, it's not obvious on the first watch, so it could go under the radar, but if you just watch Havertz while he's in our mid or low block, he has a really clear understanding of where to stand. Best example is probably periods in the first half of the Community Shield against Man City, as they struggle to play out despite their domination of possession. He's blocking the entry pass to Rodri really well, forcing him to drop and forcing them wide and chasing them back really nicely. His distances are just right to force them to commit. I can't show footage because of copyright, and screenshots are useless to analyse an individual in the press, but go watch it on Arsenal.com. Just watch Havertz and you'll see what I mean. And his duel numbers look pretty good in this new role too. Very small sample size alert, but against Forest, Havertz won 50% of his duels, including 56% in the air. Tough tackling, all action, best 6 in the league, Casemiro won 20% against Wolves.
If I speak, I am in big trouble.
But that is unfair considering the ridiculous job Eric Ten Emery gave him. But for Havertz, there are encouraging statistical signs early in the season. His understanding of attacking situations is first class. He seems to always make the right call, and early. We know about his running numbers, but one of his biggest strengths is his ability to read the game state, read the situation, and tailor his response. He knows when he needs to hold his position as the sole centre forward, he knows when to vacate that space, he times his arrivals well, and in specific situations like this one, where Timber wins the ball on the edge of our box and starts a counter, he plays a more facilitative role. You could argue a traditional centre forward might take the direct route here, but he recognises early that Timber's space to drive into is where he's standing, and subsequently vacates it. I also love how he reads the movement of others, especially Saka and Ødegaard, who are a bit more predictable. Often, and again early, he creates channels for them to run into as soon as they receive it, ahead of the ball, just through his movement. He is a space creator, so while you might not be watching him because he's not on the ball, the player you are watching might only be able to move through the pitch because of him. On the ball, Havertz has a lot of great qualities that have been discussed before and will be discussed again. But for the purposes of this, I just wanted to focus on his off-ball work. Thing is, you're not going to go into work on Monday morning and talk about Havertz's positioning between the lines, unless you're me. So in that sense, I think he'll always be a cultural victim of the emotional reactivity of fans, as it will be easy to write him off. But look closer, and he is really delivering us something special in many ways, and it's now up to us to get the best out of him. Now, all that said, I want to be clear that I don't think Havertz is the perfect player. He's not at the level I want him to be yet, he wouldn't have been my choice this summer, and I'm still unconvinced that he's right long term for our starting 11, to my eyes, though I think he's great depth. As I've mentioned before, I think he's still a little bit weak under contact for a man of his size. I'd like to see him strike through the ball more cleanly. I think he's a little loose on the ball here and there, and I think his passing could be crisper around the box. My main thing though, is that I'd like to see the game flow through him. Part of this is his character, a little quiet and unassuming from what I can tell, and part of it will be growing in stature at a new club with lots of big characters. But I think Havertz might be at his best when he's trusted more to run games. He might have the same problem as Fabio Vieira, Martin Ødegaard. At the moment, he's too facilitative for others, too much of a passenger on the ball at times, and I think for my money there's a level of proactivity and aggression missing that can be added without losing his other valuable qualities. But the bottom line is this: is he producing value for money on the pitch? Are we getting, according to Capology.com, £280,000 worth of talent? Are we getting a return on our investment of £65 million? Honestly, right now, I don't know if we are, but it is very early days, and it's still far too soon to write him off completely. Because I'm of the opinion he's a player that we have to learn how to judge. He's so unique and could play such a variety of roles for us. Just writing him off on the basis of goals and assists this season is so reductive in my view. You can't fight the trolls, so I'm speaking to those of you down the middle, those who haven't made up their mind. Please look closely. I'm sure I'll return to this video in 6 months' time with a whole new perspective on how Havertz plays, much more information and a different view. But for now, if you take one thing away from this, I just urge you to consider the lens you're judging Havertz through. Don't judge a fish's ability to climb a tree and all that. Final thing. You'll see countless think pieces, countless posts, countless bits of punditry this season that will tell you that Mikel needs to find Havertz's best position. At best, if Havertz has a decent run of goal scoring, for example, the punditry will be, well, we don't know his best position, but it doesn't matter for now. It's the first and easiest bit of criticism that you can give Havertz. This is a whole other video in itself, but briefly, I think part of that comes from people who don't want to admit that Arsenal are good and are trying to find holes. But mainly, it's this. Sometimes a manager finding a player's best position is useful, but we're dealing with a manager in his first job, by the way, who is genuinely competing with, in my opinion, the best Premier League team of all time, coached by the greatest manager of all time. He might know what he's doing with Havertz more than Rio Ferdinand. It's just a guess. But joking aside, we actually do know what he's doing with him. Mikel himself says Havertz will play a number of roles. So to the he needs to find his best position crowd, I suggest we flip it the other way. Maybe the variety is the point. So let's judge it from there. You may not like that, but let's at least judge it from the angle that it's being presented from. I sense this isn't the last conversation we're going to have about Havertz. So I'll leave you with this. I can't remember who said this first because it wasn't me, but I think it's brilliant. Does Kai Havertz need to adapt to Arsenal, or do Arsenal and Arsenal fans need to adapt to Kai Havertz?